petrol and diesel be cheaper, and who should cut the tax? That is the big discussion going on right now. But there is now a formula that shows that if crude is brought under GST, like a whole host of other items, then the base rate for petrol and diesel can be 75 rupees per litre for petrol and 68 rupees per litre for diesel. Now, considering petrol is touching as close to 100 rupees per litre in some places, that would be a huge relief. The question is, how would this work, and would centre and state actually agree to bring this under the ambit of GST? It's important to remember that states have so far insisted on crude being out of GST because it is one of the few revenue sources they have, along with alcohol, where they can tax themselves. Real estate is also in that list. Now, the author of this interesting report by the State Bank of India is Soumyakanti Ghosh, who is the Group Chief Economist at SBI. Mr. Ghosh, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us about this interesting formula that you have proposed. What happens if this is brought under the ambit of GST? Of course, whether it is or not is a matter of speculation, but how would it make a difference?
Yeah, thank you, Tamanna, for inviting me to the show. I think the GST on petroleum products is a long vexed problem for both the center and the states, because it is, for the states, it is one of the few options which gives them flexibility to tax in times of unforeseen circumstances. And for the center, it also serves the same purpose as we saw during the pandemic. So I think by logic, and it's very difficult to let go that flexibility of taxes on petroleum products, be it for the center or be it for the states. And interestingly, the taxing of petrol products is a vexed issue not only in India but globally. But having said that, I think right now we haven't, even though we have a GST in the country, we have a taxation structure which is different from 30 states across the country. We have a taxation structure which is different for the center. So even though we are in the midst of a GST, one nation, one tax, we have actually more than 30 taxation structure for the states. In fact, in Maharashtra, we have two taxation structure, one for the Mumbai and one for the Navi Mumbai. So against this background, we thought that why not try to find out some sort of a formula, solace, which could actually strike a middle ground for the center, the states, and also the consumers. So what we did was that we did a lot of simulations and found out, based on the current best case scenario at crude prices, exchange rate, and we found out that if petrol and diesel were bought under the GST at the highest tax bracket, I mean the 28%, where the center gets 14% and the states get 14%, but with also a cess on petrol and diesel, with the cess on diesel being lower than that of the petrol. And if that is, and all these, and the assumption which goes is that these are all shared equally between the center and the states, then you found out that the petrol prices could be at ₹75, diesel could be at 68. And the revenue loss to the center and the state could be at 0.4% of GDP. So this is basically, and the interesting point is that we have actually given the flexibility to the government to, if the crude moves up to say 75, and even if the exchange rate depreciate to 80, and even if the crude goes down to 20. So on both the sides, there is a possibility of a revenue loss and revenue gain, which the government can decide that not to pass on the consumers, keep the oil prices same at 75 or 68 at the case may be, and in times of distress, if the oil prices go up, that could be used to compensate the center and the states in terms of a revenue loss. So this is some sort of a formula worked out. So it remains to be seen, what could be an operational flexibility or the thinking in the government.
No, but in this formula, Mr. Soumyakanti Ghosh, why tax petrol and diesel at 28%, which is the highest slab under GST, and your sin goods, so to speak, are taxed at petrol and diesel? The basic question that a lot of people ask is, why is something that is so widely used by everyone, all sections of the society, directly and indirectly, being taxed so highly? So do you think that on those grounds it is fair to, even in this formula, tax petrol and diesel at 28%?
Yeah, in fact, interestingly, Tamanna, by that logic, the cess we are proposing 30 for petrol and 20 for diesel. In fact, that cess should also be not there. But just to get your attention to this point, yes, the 28% tax bucket may be a little bit on the higher side. But if you look into the revenue projections which the center has proposed next year, 3.35 lakh crores in excise duty, which are going to mop up from petrol and diesel petrol products. And the states we are assuming it could be, the numbers are not yet out because the states have not all presented their budget. But our estimate that this number could be as high as 2.7 lakh crores. So now you add 3.35 to 2.7 lakh crores, which makes a number more than 6 lakh crores. So to mobilize such an amount of revenue by the center and states, if you tax it at a lower end, the revenue loss could in fact be much higher. Of course, we are estimating some elasticity and buoyancy in revenue growth, because if you cut the tax, if you cut the prices, obviously there will be a growth, volume growth. So that also has been taken into account. But my sense is that given the large amount which the center and states depend on oil as a source of revenue, it is very difficult to keep the tax rates below the 28%, which is the highest under GST.
Okay, now the question is, why should states agree to this? Bringing petrol and diesel under the ambit of GST has been something which has been proposed for a while. Whenever you ask the central government that why are taxes so high, they say, why don't we bring it under the GST? It will be great for everyone. You have said there is no political will to do so. But my question is, where is the economic push for states to do so? They have all lost revenue in the pandemic year. A lot of them are heavily dependent on revenues. So where is the case for them to move to this? And will they not lose more than the states, than the central government will?
I think that's a very good question, Tamanna, but let me also point out one point over here. Even if you are moving that to the GST, I think the demand for getting oil under GST is also to take advantage of the input credit, which currently is around 20 to 25,000 crores as per our estimates. So basically, the other thing which we need to mention is that if oil is pushed under GST, then this input credit should not be made available. Otherwise, the government could actually lose even more revenue than we are estimating. Now, having said that, the point to note over here is that the interesting thing is that in this formula, we are proposing an exact equivalent distribution of the revenue of the taxation structure between the center and states, even in the case of cess on petrol and diesel, and also in the 28% category. So that is the crucial assumption which goes over there. So and if you actually look into the revenue loss, it is in fact much lower than the states than for the center. So the idea is that a little bit move towards an equitable distribution of the taxation structure could cut the losses of the states to a significant extent, but could also increase the losses of the center to some extent. So ultimately, we have to find a middle ground. So, and in this tax structure, the important point is that some of the states which rely more on oil tax revenue as a source of revenue, for example, like Maharashtra is one of them, Rajasthan is one of them, Tamil Nadu is one of them, they stand to lose, say, around 3 to 4% of the revenue. Average revenue on oil is around 13% for all these states. But there are some states like Uttar Pradesh, which actually stands to gain under the new regime because they don't tax the oil to such a great extent. So there are both sides to the story. Some states would tend to lose, some large states like Uttar Pradesh and even West Bengal would stand to gain. But in the ultimate analysis, the idea is that let's have an equitable tax structure whereby the losses for the states are lowered from the current levels, and for the center, it goes up a little bit from the current level. So ultimately, we strike a middle ground in between these, which is basically 0.4% of India's GDP, or around 1 lakh crores, of which 70,000 crores is for the center, or maybe 30,000 crores for the states.
Now, Dr. Ghosh, this is right now a hypothetical situation that you have presented. You've presented a formula that what happens if this comes under GST and center and state split up revenue 50-50, etc. The ground reality right now is that we're not moving any closer to this being under GST. We have a situation where some states have given a little bit of relief. The center is contemplating what to do. The finance minister has spoken about a dharam sankat and said there has to be an agreement between center and state. In your view, what can happen right now? There are some reports which are saying that the center can drop up to 8.5 rupees per litre on excise without losing too much money from its targets. Is it time now for the center to step forward and let go a bit of those excise tax earnings, considering that it is a central government which has increased the excise duty so much in the last 1 year?
No, I think there is a merit in the argument which you are saying. But my only point which I want to make it over here is that the last year was an exceptional situation for the government, and the central government had no other recourses, because when the revenue had collapsed, I think excise was used as an excellent counter-cyclical fiscal policy tool to mop up the revenue. But this type of extras at this level is also not sustainable for a longer period of time. The good thing is that the crude oil prices have started to move down. If they have moved down from these levels, then I think it could have been very problematic on the part of the government. So, but my sense is that the government, the central government, has also clearly said that it wants to peg the fiscal deficit at 4.5% in 2025-26, and for them growth is the utmost priority today. So we are 5 years away from that 4.5%. And our estimates show that the fiscal deficit for this year could be even lower than 8.7%, but that's a separate point. So my point is that why not try to push for an GST on oil when the iron is hot, and when everybody is talking about growth and fiscal consolidation or fiscal austerity at this point is possibly is not one of the priorities of any government across the world. So nobody will say anything to you if you lose a little bit amount of revenue, but you keep the number. But the benefits which will come from, say, for example, if you fix the petrol prices and diesel prices at a certain level, could be enormous. There could be actually, the markets will rejoice, and obviously, I think for people like us, we can obviously pay. But there is, of course, a segment of the society like the transportation segment and others for which it's an input cost. And remember that this year the government is borrowing a huge amount from the market. So any pressures on inflation, fuel inflation, which obviously in fact impacts the CPI inflation with a lag, could be detrimental to the interest rate. I think that everybody wants to avoid it. So why not try to push for this one at this point of time rather than wait for a period when maybe the time may not be opportune. So timing is the important factor to me today to get oil under GST.
Well, that's that's an interesting point. Strike when the iron is hot. Well, you have said in your report that the political will is lacking. Will there be a turnaround? Will any government, center or state, give up this low-hanging fruit and easily, efficiently collected tax at a time like this when earnings look a little hazy going forward is the big question. But thank you so much, Soumyakanti Ghosh, for joining us and spelling out that very interesting formula you've put forward. Imagine the relief, 75 rupees for petrol, 68 rupees for diesel, a huge relief from where we sit today.
Thank you.